In this video, we're going to walk through how to create an image flash. So if I hit play, a lot of times in games, whenever you take damage or whenever something good happens, we may want to indicate to the entire screen that something is happening. And it's a pretty common technique, and there's not a ton of resources out there on how to do this easily. So I'm going to show you how to put this together. And in the end, we're going to have a canvas object with a flash image script on it. And anywhere in our scene, we can reference that object and say, hey, we want you to flash, and then we'll animate it in and out. Okay, so from an empty scene, first thing we need is we need a UI object. So I'm going to create over here UI image. This is going to be our image that we want to flash over the screen. You'll notice that by default, it comes very tiny. So a really quick and easy way to scale that to the screen is to click on the anchor. You hold down Shift and Alt at the same time. This one at the bottom right will just automatically scale to the whole screen. So click that. Or you could click it and manipulate these things, but that's the fast way to do it. Also, I think let's give this a slightly better default. Usually this is nice for damage. I'm just going to put it on red as a default, but we'll give the ability to change that later on. We will also put the opacity down as well, because we want to animate the opacity up and down. And lastly, we're going to turn off raycast target because we may not want the player to be able to click, and that flash screen will be able to block their clicks inside of the screen, just in case we need it later. I'm going to rename this object flash image, create a new C# script called flash image as well. I'm going to attach the flash image script onto our flash image. And this is our object, and the script will tell it when something accesses this script and tells the image to flash, then it will animate this thing on and off. Okay, so let's go inside of our script. In order for this script to work, we need to ensure that there is an image component attached, which is our image right here. So we're going to say require component type of image. And you'll see it's trying to autocomplete. That's because it does not recognize image. We need to add using Unity engine.ui at the top. And you'll see now it recognizes image. Now we're also going to cache our image. We'll just default it to null. We're going to cache our image here because we want to find it and get it in awake. So void awake, and then get our image. So image equals get component image. And because we're requiring this, we're requiring that this image component be attached right here on the same object as our script, then we know that we'll find something. So that's pretty handy. We're going to get rid of all this other stuff. Create a public function that other scripts can see if they want to start a new flash. And now we want to figure out what pieces of information we need to know in order for this flash to work. So one thing is maybe the duration of the flash. So we'll call this seconds for one flash. I'm going to be a little bit verbose here just to make it really, really clear what's happening. We also need to know what the max alpha we want this flash to be. So for example, if we're coming over here, we want this to go to 0.5 versus 1. We need to clarify that. Or maybe we want control over that. Maybe we want the flash to be subtle and only to be a partial alpha. So we'll call this max alpha to animate to. And lastly, if we want to specify a color, we'll allow them to pass in a new color. So then other scripts will be able to call this function, and if they give it this information, we want to animate it. Set our image's color, so new color. Now the second thing is this alpha right here, we're going to convert this to a 0 to 1 value because we're going to do lerping to animate this. And if you don't know what lerping is, it's really simply, if you have one thing and then you have another thing, you can animate between these two values by returning a value between 0 and 1. So for example, if we have one color that's white and one color that's red, we can get the animation between white and red by returning a 0 to 1 value. So 0.5 would be whatever's between white and red, and so forth. We can do this with positions. We're going to use that idea in our animation for our flash. So what we're going to do here is we're going to ensure our max alpha isn't above 1. To do that, we're going to say max alpha. Just going to clamp it. So we're going to say, what do we want to clamp? I'm going to clamp our max alpha. What do we want it to be between? We want it to be between 0 and 1. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do is start a coroutine. So if you've never used a coroutine before, it's just a function that allows us to leave off at a certain point and return on the next update frame. So we can continue where we left off, which is pretty nice and allows us to do some nice animation type of things. So in order to do this, I'm just going to type iEnumerator, we'll just call this flash. We're going to keep this private because we don't want other things to see this. We just want them to go through this larger function here. We're going to pass in this information from our public function into our enumerator so that we can use it to animate. So we'll call this float seconds for 1 flash, float max alpha, and color new color. And you'll see we may not even need this new color. So I'm going to, because we're setting the color up here, and then we're just gonna animate what the image color is over here. So here's the other thing about coroutines. I don't want there to be multiple flashes that are happening simultaneously. I want this one flash to reset itself. So in order to do that, I actually need to store my coroutine inside of something and then restart it every single time I call it. So a really handy pattern for doing this is at the very top, I'm going to retain a reference for my current running coroutine. Call this current flash routine. And then down in start flash, we're just going to reset it. We're going to say firstly, if there's already a current flash routine running, so if it's not null, then we want it to stop. So stop coroutine, the one that's running. So if we already have one going, stop it wherever it is because we want to restart it. Because if it is null, we don't really want to stop something that's null. And next, we want to take our current flash routine. We want to start a new coroutine and store it inside of our running instance of our current flash routine. So if that's too confusing, just know that these lines of code right here are just going to reset the current running flash animation. So then we want to call our flash iEnumerator. So start our coroutine and then give it a coroutine to start. So it's going to be this one right here. So flash, and then we need to give it the parameters that it needs. So it's going to be seconds for 1 flash and our max alpha. So we should have this so far. Now we actually need to animate it. So let's break this down conceptually to see what needs to happen. So first we need to animate the flash in. Once we do that, we need to animate the flash out. Now we're going to break this up this way so that we can handle one thing at a time. We forgot a semicolon up here, so we'll add that. Okay, great. To animate the flash in, we need to calculate what the duration of our flash in is going to be. Now remember, a seconds for 1 flash is going to be the entire flash. So the flash in is going to be half of that. The flash out is going to be the other half. We're going to call this, we're going to put it under the comment right here. Flash in duration, just to keep this really readable. And we're going to specify this to be the seconds for 1 flash divided by 2, because we only want half the total time to be the flash in. So now we want to animate the flash in. We're going to do a for loop for this. And I press tab twice and that'll autocomplete it. But we're going to change some of this out. And this for loop, we're going to increment slightly. We're going to wait a frame, animate a little bit more, wait a frame, animate a little bit more, and wait a frame. Because if we don't wait the frame, we're going to do it all, and then we'll never see the incremental change. So that's why we're even using an iEnumerator, is so that we can wait and then show the changes over time. I'm going to use t to start counting time, and I'm going to count it from 0 seconds. For int t equals 0, and our time, we want this to continue to run for as long as, so t is less than or equal to flash and duration. So as long as we're counting from 0 and we have not passed the seconds for 1 flash divided by 2, so the flash and duration, then we want to continue to count t equals plus equals time, delta time. We're going to continue to count in seconds, right? And if you notice this, it's because we made a mistake over here. We actually want float t because we're going to be using decimals. So we'll do that. So we're starting at 0 seconds. We are counting our duration for our flash in, and we're going to continue to run this until we've hit that duration. But we're going to continue to count up our t. That's just going to be our timer that's keeping track of how many seconds has passed. Create a new color change, and then we want to apply it, right? We're going to create a new color. It's a really simple, I believe it's a struct, so it's pretty low cost to create. So we're going to call this color this frame. So this is going to be our new temporary one. We're doing this so that we can create a temporary new color, make the calculations on it, and then apply it to the actual image color. So first, our new temporary color is, we're going to start off what the current image color is. So as it's animating, we need to get the current value. Then we want to affect the alpha, right? We want to animate the alpha up and down. So this color is going to be RGB and then A for alpha. So we're going to go color this frame, alpha.a, mathf. So this is our lerp. And in this case, we're actually going to the max alpha. We don't need a 0 to 1. We just want to return what our final value is. So we're going to do a max alpha right here. So between 0 and our destination, and this value right here, once we give it any two values, like a starting value and an end value, we need to give it a value between 0 to 1. So 0.5 would return the exact middle between these values. 0 would return this value. 1 would return this value. So just think of like a line with this value on one end and this value on the other. And then based off of 0 to 1, like 0.5, 0.75, 0.9, whatever, is the value between those two. You can look up Lerping animation if you're confused by that. So to do this, we're going to say the current value, so our elapsed time, which is t, divided by our total time. So if our elapsed time is equal to our total time, then it should, that divided by 1 is going to be 1. And so we should return the max alpha. If there is no elapsed time, it'll be 0, which will return this. And so we'll just animate between there. And once we've calculated what our new change is going to be, we actually need to apply it. Color. We need to change our actual color. This is the one that we're actually keeping track of with this new one, this new temporary one that we've been calculating. So we'll say color this frame. And this will apply the new alpha changes to this image color, which was the apply it. Now the last thing we need to do here is we need to remember to wait until the next frame, which the code for that is just yield return null. This just says, okay, pass it back. We're done in here with it for this frame. And then when we come back next frame, we'll leave off where we right here, and then we'll run it again. And then we'll wait, and then we'll run it again, and then we'll wait, and so forth. So this is how we're able to see our animation over time. And now let's test this just to make sure that we're on the right track. So to test this, I'm going to create a level controller object, create empty level controller. And this could be anything that needed to access the flash image. We'll need to get a reference to there. And there's lots of ways to do that. I'm just going to show you the simplest one, which first we're going to make a level controller. Going to apply the script like that. Double click, and then inside of our level controller, very simply, we're just going to say if input.get key down, keycode.space. And this is just simulating an input press, but this could be like on collide, on taking damage, whatever, it doesn't matter. We'll play the flash, and that's going to be, well, now we're realizing that we need an instance to our flash image, right? We need access to this flash image in the screen, which means that we need access to this component on this object. So the easiest way to test this inside of our level controller, we're going to leave a reference open, serialized field for flash image. And we're just going to call this what it is, flash image, default it to null. Okay, so if we do this and we come back over here, And our level controller, we just need to drag in our flash image, just like that. And our UI flash image theoretically could always exist. So if we have something in the scene, we can really easily just leave a reference open for that. You could find other ways to get a reference to this. So a singleton pattern would be one. I didn't want to force that upon you because I know that a lot of people don't like that, but you could convert this to a singleton pattern if you like. You could also spawn a flash image at runtime and then call it from there. There's lots of ways to do this, but just the simplest, easiest way to do it is to just get a reference to an already existing one in the scene. And then we just want to do flash image, start flash. And then we'll give it we'll make it quick. So 0.25 F. Then we want to max alpha. Let's make this half opacity. So that would be 0.5 because it's between 0 and 1. And then give it a new color. We'll just pass it in color.red, I think is fine. If you wanted a custom color, you could actually leave it open at the top right here. Color. And then, yeah, new color. And then we'll default that to color.red. And then instead of forcing this down here, we'll just, right, you could do the same thing with the other parameters if you want. But what this allows us to do right here, if we leave it at the top, is the designer can come over here and if you let this compile, they can actually choose the color that they want to define here. So maybe they want it blue on this object and red on the other. That's fine. Let's test this out. Make sure that you fill in your reference here. Again, drag in your flash image, set your color. You see how it's animating in. Now we need to animate it back out. So animating out is going to be just like animating in, but the reverse. So we can use very similar code actually. I'm just going to retype it though, just for practice. So we need to calculate our flash out duration, right? And if we're good about labeling like this, we really don't need all of these comments. I think most of this is self-explanatory. I think it may be helpful to say, hey, we're waiting till the next frame, and maybe to label a large block of code like this. But because we're naming things well, we don't really need too many other comments. So our flash out duration is going to be equal to seconds for one flash divided by 2. And then we need to create our for loop. Again, double tabs. We want to make this float. T is going to be our elapsed time is equal to 0. As long as our elapsed time is less than our flash out duration. So we have not been going for the duration of our flash out. Then we want to increment T by per second. Now we want to do the same thing, create a temporary color this frame. We want to adjust the alpha based on our animation. So lerp, it's .lerp. Max alpha. And actually, in this case, we want our starting point to be the max, right? Because we're animating out. So we're going to go between max alpha and 0 because we're starting at max and we're animating back down. And as long as T divided by flash out duration, which again, we'll convert it between 0 to 1, semicolon, and then finally actually apply our calculation to our image color. Yield return null. So wait for the next frame. Okay, so let's save that, minimize, test this. And you'll see one problem here. If you click on your flash image, the final frame is ending at 2, and this is just when we're starting our for loop and not being a perfect match to the elapsed time. So just to enforce this, what I'm going to do, always exit play mode. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset it back to 0, just hard enforce that at the very end. Ensure alpha is set to 0. And I think this is a good case for a comment when I'm putting my reasoning for doing this. At the very end, last thing, I'm just going to make a brand new color of 0, 0, 0, 0. The reason I'm doing color 32 is because I want to be able to set the alpha. And if you do a color, it's just RGB. So if I save it, now hit play, And you'll see it's nulling out all of our values at the very end, which is nice because something else may want to call it. You also notice because we are resetting the same coroutine right here, we can spam the button. It won't cause weird interference between multiple separate coroutines because we're just animating from the same one, which is this little pattern right here, which is pretty handy. So now anything in your scene can actually call a flash image, and you could just have one in your scene. And as long as they get a reference to that and they send it a color, right? You get a reference to it, you play it, you send it a color to that particular one in the scene, start flash, give it a speed, right? A duration. You give it a max alpha and you give it a new color, then you should be able to flash your image no matter where you are in your scene. So just a pretty handy feature for you, especially if you're doing any sort of damage system or player feedback, or you just really want to add some weight to something happening in your game. You don't want to write a custom thing, or, personally, I don't like to do this through the animator system just because it's more lightweight to do this through code, and you don't have to worry about all these extra component hookups or anything. Just very simply, I just want to animate it on and animate it off. You should be able to do that through code. I think it makes sense to do that. And what if you wanted to take longer? You're stuck with keyframes. So this is a really handy modular way of doing that. And I hope it helps you out inside of your prototypes and your game projects.